you say there is some transference of this, of your time spent meditating in a seated posture, meditating during Taiji boxing, meditating during your Hatha yoga and pranayama yoga group sessions, with 20 hours to 25 hours a week of work, would you say there is some transference? Meaning, what you're learning there, you're seeing changes in other parts of your life, which are beneficial. We can, and if so, if you are seeing it as a yes,
most definitely.
Personally, on the cognitive level, mentally, how do you see any differences? How do you feel differences there?
There's a laundry list. There's quite a few.
Actually, back it up. I've noticed that you are a left hemispheric person, which means you are a process person.
Very much
You're
so.
a person that's step by step. You have to take it that way and so forth. You're not. You have worked very hard with your interpersonal relationships with people, and that's what makes such a holistic aspect of you. But I have noticed that just with a quick calibration look at asking questions, I saw the way you move. You're a visual person. But at the same time, you are very, very much, like you're very comfortable looking in this direction. While sitting over there, you wouldn't be that comfortable because you're a visual and you're tactile and you have to get your hands on it and you have to see the process.
Yeah.
Touchy-feely is not really you. So, okay, that being stated, I'm going to say from a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the greatest, the best, and 1 being the lowest, how much transference would you say would be in your cognitive behavior, your ability to focus and use your mind to process information?
5.
When you say, and then compared to where you were before this, and keep in mind, you are a college professor, so you should have some really powerful abilities to focus as is. You demonstrated it through your professional ability to join the club, of the academia club. That being said, you still think cognitively you've improved so much, it's a 5.
Yes. No, and the ways in which it's improved, I think, are clearly demonstrable. The easiest way I can break it down is thinking about my work habits. The ways in which I do my work. I've always been focused about my work. I'm one of those, it's typically academic. When it's time to sit down and do a project, you're in the project. Whether it's grading, writing, research, doesn't matter. You can invest yourself fully in what you're doing enough so that that becomes the focal point. That's all you do. So I've always had that ability. What's changed is the length of time I'm able to do that and the number of times in a day I'm actually able to achieve that level of focus and intensity. So if you think about, well, I'm going to back up a second here because I think there's some clarification that needs to happen on why this has really happened. I know you know this because we've talked about this, but I've been an insomniac since I was 13 years old. I regularly go without sleep.
We're going into the kinetic aspects of it, even though strong body, strong mind, but still now you're going from the thinking aspects to actually how that affects your physical aspects.
It is, but
go ahead and finish. I think I know how to understand this. Keep going.
It's the particular nature of my insomnia that I think makes this so relevant. I went, obviously, when I was, 18, to get a diagnosis on how to treat the insomnia. And basically when you have insomnia, there's 2 primary ways you can treat it. It's either a physiological condition or a psychological condition. In my case, psychological. Quite functionally, my brain will not stop. It doesn't want to shut down long enough for me to hit REM sleep. And I don't like sleeping pills. I don't like medication. It shuts down the ability of my brain to be functional, to do what it does, what I'm good at. Once I started doing the meditation, granted there was all the physical training on top of it, which would exhaust the body, but the
meditation, you're talking about the pranayama meditation and the Taoist meditation. We can go over that. Are those the meditations that you were doing?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
I'll describe those later. Go ahead.
Yeah, the breathing regimen, the seated asanas, the process of focusing through the act of breathing on one's mental state is the best way, I think the concise way of describing it. Once I built a regimen for doing that on a daily basis, I started sleeping.
Interesting.
A little bit at a time, and now, whereas I would regularly stay awake for 3, sometimes 4 days at a stretch without REM sleep, I'm sleeping every night for at least a couple of hours every night. Now, what that's translated to is that in terms of the meditation, that's both my if you will, my wake up routine and my go to bed routine. There's a version of it I do to get myself up and moving in the morning. There's a version of it I do before I go to bed. What's also changed is I've got a version of that I do in the middle of the day. So anywhere between noon and 2 o'clock, I have 30 minutes, a small window, a break between classes, a break in office hours, finish one project, put aside another one, shut my office door, go through a quick breathing regimen, refocus, and I can go right back into my work. I've taken caffeine completely out of my diet. I've taken almost all stimulants out of my diet.
Interesting.
My primary stimulant now is exercise, breathing, and focused meditation.
Has this affected, we're now into the, it's how your mental, your kinetic regimen, which is the posture and the breathing and the mental state that you are trying to achieve while doing it, otherwise focusing, mindfulness. It sounds like the first part would be focused attention, and then the next one would be, because you're visualizing, so it would be object monitoring. These two are probably your biggest, and then of course, once you're able to do this, you're breaking this up during the course of the day.
Yeah.
You are doing, I'm assuming you're doing Kapalabhati, which is bellows breathing.
Every time.
You're doing balanced breathing, which is 5 in, hold for 5, breathe in for 5,
out for 5,
out for 5, and so forth. Okay, you're doing retention and suspension of breath.
And the alternate nasal breathing.
And alternate nasal breathing. That which is supposed to affect the immune system, which might affect any recurring illnesses that you might have.
Which is why I have not had a sinus infection all season.
So do you regularly have sinus infections, or they just come once in a while?
No, I like clockwork, I can predict them down to the month. I get a sinus infection in the beginning of September, and I get a sinus infection at the beginning of November. I mean, if you want, I can show you the medical records. I've had them for as long as I can recall, and then I get one in spring at the beginning of March, every semester.
And you have been practicing yoga since early August, late July.
That's right.
And my classes specifically, am I correct?
That's right.
And the other classes, they don't do the pranayama?
No.
Okay, so basically pranayama.
That is the trick.
And you've been doing those classes, and you have had no,
I've had 0 illnesses.
Has there been a house sickness that's dropped in?
The whole 2 weeks ago, well, it's November, we're in Iowa, weather's changing. I have small children in school, and so, what happens, so one kid gets sick, every kid gets sick. The entire family had strep throat 2 weeks ago. We all tested positive for it. I was the only one without symptoms.
Interesting.
No symptoms.
But the doctor did say that you tested positive for it, so
right.
it was in your system, but there were no symptoms for it, and
That's
you were
right.
feeling it. Interesting. The ability that you realize that you won't be getting sick, at least to interrupt your training, do you understand, how do you feel that the non-aloma viola, which is the alternate nasal breathing, why that's important to your training?
I wouldn't do it without that. That I think is probably, it's my favorite part. It actually feels the best when the Kapalabhati. That's the part that makes my lungs feel warm. That's the best way of saying it. Yeah, I would not have a regimen without that.
And you think the ability that you might feel that you may not have a significant illness that would corrupt your training, how do you feel about that with regard to being able to continue?
What's the word? I'm thrilled, really, for 2 reasons. 1, it doesn't interrupt my training. 2, it doesn't interrupt my work. I don't have sick days.
Oh, that's right.
I don't go to class sick. I mean, if a student gets sick, they can miss a class. If the professor gets sick, everybody misses class. So, the typical rule for professors is when you're sick, you still go to class.
Right.
But you don't work your best. You're obviously not at your peak. You're not clear. You're not focused. It's not as good for the students. And so when I would get sinus infections, you always get a little groggy, a little run down. You're not sharp. You're not as precise. And class suffers for it. Not this year. Not this semester.
Affect behavior, the guiding of behavior that's emotional and content. The West considers it a chemical issue that can be controlled with breathing, and they accept that. But the East has a little more refined understanding and definitely more cultivated expression of how this is affected through these types of regimens that people who are on the road to mastery do. Most of the breathing stuff is so that you can facilitate your training. That's why you're taught it in the beginning, and then at the end, you end up refining and cultivating, because as the exercises are taught, you refine them and cultivate them into being you.
Right.
Which it sounds like you're starting to do already with the help of your understanding of academics and how it should be applied sciences. That being said, you are practicing a martial art, Taiji boxing.
Mm-hmm.
The Taiji boxing has a meditative component to it.
Definitely.
Taiji, or martial arts, is a science that does deal with violence.
Yeah.
But it does it through the sense of seeking centrality, cognitively, kinetically, and emotionally. In that sense, do you think? Let's go back to the kinetics. On a 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, where you were and where you are now, do you see yourself numbering it where?
5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest.
Kinetic. We're talking about kinetic.
Kinetically, I'd put myself at a 3.
Okay.
There's still, I'm stronger than I was 2 months ago. I'd have put myself at a 1. I was getting winded going upstairs.
But you see yourself making some good improvements.
Definitely.
Are there any definitive, or I should say, quantitative changes in your your thing? Body fat count tests that you may have taken prior to, and then just recently, have you taken any of those?
Yes.
Do you remember what you scored? What is the improvement? We can look at that later. What is your improvement?
I've always been heavy. I've always been big.
You came in about 325.
325 at end of July.
We'll make this easy. What do you weigh now?
280.
He weighs 280. Some of that has to do with his diet. A lot of his diet is he's doing a drinking diet right now. Most of his drinking, but he does do solid foods. What do you eat for solids? You do a lot of protein drinks before and after at certain times.
Protein shake for breakfast, post-workout protein shake. Lunch is typically chicken, whole roasted vegetables, maybe a sandwich.
Good.
I've gone from eating only 1 meal a day to eating, well, I try to shoot for 5. Sometimes it's only 4. Depends on the schedule. But at least a couple of meals every day, and maybe some kind of small snack. So
something green, something
always
red,
always green
reds,
vegetables.
red,
Yep.
something white,
Something white.
that you drink, something black. So you fall into white, black, green, yellow, and red color chart.
A lot of black beans, a lot of hummus, a lot of chicken.
Okay, so he's following that. That's a regimen that I have suggested for him to use. I don't go beyond that. I'm not a nutrition, but I make sure he does it 5 meals a day, 4 meals a day suggested. He's following that.
Lost 10% body fat.
He's lost 10% body fat since when?
My first body fat analysis was in January, and I was 36% body fat in January. And that one was done at my university for our annual health screening.
Right. And
then yesterday morning, I had an actual pinch test.
Right.
And I am now 25% body fat. So
that's pretty impressive. We don't know how much of that was the year and how much of that is recent, but we do know you didn't even work out until when?
Well, and I gained weight between my January analysis and the start of our July class.
Okay.
In January, I weighed about 305.
By
our July class, I weighed 325.
Okay, so that now we see where. Okay, got it. So for the most part, it probably was.
It was the working out and the
working
diet.
out. So he did a lot. He went literally. He lost. Geez, you lost 12% body fat. No. 11%. Jeez, he lost a lot of body fat.
Had to buy new pants.